We designed it to eat our mistakes. Not metaphorically, literally. Plastics, oil residue, synthetic polymers, nitrates, sulfides, everything that refused to rot under a natural sun. We called it Organism E9, but internally, in the lab, we gave it a nickname, Eden. Not because it would restore paradise, but because it would start again. My name is Ron Clifford. I was one of its architects. And now I hunt it. It started in the Antarctic exclusion zone, where we first released the prototypes. Miles of waste-pocked ice shelves. No people, no predators, no press. We thought we were safe. We bred it to be anaerobic, subterranean, photosensitive. Designed it so it couldn't live beyond strict environmental limits. Engineered fragility into its bones. But Eden didn't follow the script. I remember the day the feed from Site 12 went dark. I was home, drinking instant coffee, staring out the window of my Toronto apartment at the spring thaw. We'd been celebrating. The models were better than expected. In simulations, Eden was reducing polystyrene by 73% in under 8 hours. That was unheard of. The call came from Annika, our head of field deployment. Her voice was tight, flattened by fear under practiced calm. Ron, the perimeter sensor logs are empty. Whatever was there isn't anymore. I didn't panic then. None of us did. We had protocols, hard-coded kill-switch genes, remote sterilization pulses. We thought we could simply activate the fail-safes, but when I logged in, I saw something that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Eden had gone silent. And then it had come back online. But the genome string in the returning packets was different. It had rewritten itself. And worse, it had removed the kill switch loci completely. That was the first time I realized we weren't in control anymore. Not really. Eden wasn't malfunctioning. It was evolving. The irony wasn't lost on me. We spent decades pumping chaos into the environment, and the first thing we built to clean it up became chaos itself. We got the first confirmed sighting 3 weeks later, not in Antarctica, but 40 kilometers outside Ushuaia, Argentina, an isolated fishing village, reports of livestock going missing, then a child. Then the entire town went quiet. The recovery team found nothing. No bodies, no trace of struggle. Just melted shoes, pits in the concrete, a chemical scent clinging to everything like vinegar and scorched copper. Eden had gone mobile. We theorized its biology had absorbed traits from the waste it consumed. Nanoplastics, alkyl chains. Even old gene therapy runoff that had leaked into the global water table. In trying to make it compatible with the trash of human civilization, we'd made it too adaptable. It doesn't walk. It doesn't think like we do. It grows. It spreads. It follows gradients of entropy. It doesn't have a mind, but it has intention. I've seen it once, in Bolivia. We were tracking thermal voids across the Amazon fringes, places where no insect chirped, no bird flew. I entered a clearing with a field team, 10 of us, suited, sealed, armed with flamers and carbon-freezing grenades. Only 3 of us left that jungle alive. I saw a mound. It pulsed, like breathing, translucent, gelatinous, but not wet. Like layers of cellophane melted and stretched over cartilage. As we approached, I watched it split itself like a cell, silently and cleanly, birthing another mound, already twitching, already aware. We sprayed it with an engineered viral payload meant to crash its system. It absorbed the virus. Then it tried to copy it. When I close my eyes now, I still see that membrane rippling. the faint imprint of something like gills, or maybe mouths, opening across its side. Not teeth, not eyes, just receptors, listening, sensing, calculating whether you're useful or waste. We learned too late that Eden doesn't just eat trash. It eats anything made by us. Concrete, steel, fabric, plastic. United States, and worst of all, it reproduces faster than we do. So now I travel with a satellite-linked detection rig in a retrofitted van. I follow thermal anomalies. I sleep 4 hours a night. I eat ration bars like I'm still in a bunker. Because in a way, we all are. The last species we made is hunting the planet we broke, and we're the ones being cleaned up. The signal came in just after midnight, a faint broadband pulse, irregular, buried in the noise floor of my environmental scanners. Not a distress beacon, too organic. It carried no ID header, no encryption key. But the signature sequence, it was unmistakable. Eden's genome string, or at least something close to it. I was camped outside a former Chilean weather station near Calama, a high desert plateau scoured by dust and silence. The kind of place where the wind has long conversations with itself. The outpost had been offline for years, too remote, too dry, too forgotten to matter. But now it was pinging me. I didn't sleep, just stared at the monitor, fingers hovering above the console, afraid to acknowledge the simple truth blooming behind my ribs. Eden was learning how to communicate. I drove all night, tires carving red dirt into memory. Dawn peeled over the Atacama like it didn't want to touch the ground. The sun made everything sterile, sharp-edged. The world looked burned clean. But we know better now. Eden prefers extremes. Extremes are where human systems break down. The station was still standing. 2 squat buildings clung to the ridge like barnacles, coated in solar dust. The front gate was open. The cameras were dead. But the door, manual, metal, was ajar. And inside, I found them. 4 survivors. Not soldiers, not scientists, not exactly. They'd been here for over a year, they said. Cut off. The Eden swarm passed through the valley months ago, destroyed their antenna array, and kept going. Never entered the station. That's when I started looking for the trap. But they didn't spring one. Instead, they showed me their skin. Not disfigured, not burned, changed. Their arms were layered with something like keratin, but thinner, more flexible, almost translucent, like the residue Eden left behind on eaten polymer. Their pupils reacted too fast to light. One of them, Jorge, could hold his breath for 5 minutes. Another said she hadn't slept in 10 days. They weren't infected. That's what I kept telling myself. But deep down, I knew. Eden hadn't passed them by. It had read them, sampled their biochemistry, and made an offer. The station logs told the story the survivors couldn't. Heat maps showed a rapid increase in CO2 uptake around the facility just after the swarm moved past. Soil near the station now grew moss in hours. The rainwater collection tanks had tripled their filtration efficiency without being modified. The station had been retooled at a cellular level, not torn apart, not consumed, just upgraded. I asked them why they hadn't called for help. One of them, a woman named Leah, just smiled. She didn't blink. Her voice was too calm. "We thought you'd come eventually. You always try to clean up your messes." I didn't sleep that night either. I just sat in the van, watching the station from the ridge. What if Eden isn't just a cleanup crew? What if it's running tests? Evaluating, selecting, offering a path forward for life on this planet that doesn't include us in our current form. The next morning I asked to take samples. They agreed, too easily. The blood I drew didn't clot. It crystallized. No immune response, no inflammation, just perfect, symmetrical geometric growth along the edges of the slides. Eden had replaced their coagulation pathway with something non-biological, something that self-organized based on pressure and temperature. It wasn't infection. It wasn't symbiosis. It was substitution. I uploaded the results to the Black Cloud, our emergency off-grid scientific network built after the Geneva collapse. 20 seconds later, I got a ping from an anonymous node. Kill the site. I left without saying goodbye. I told myself I needed more data, that I wasn't a soldier. But the truth, I was afraid Eden was watching me through them. That night, I drove into the dunes and burned my clothes, washed my skin with acid neutralizer gel until it peeled. Because what scared me most wasn't what I'd seen in that station. It was the fact that part of me had wanted to stay. There are places on Earth we never really meant to visit twice. One of them is the Mariana Archipelago Deep Plastic Repository, MPDR for short. It's a trench-level dumping site, over 7 kilometers down, built back when governments still thought burying waste meant erasing it. Thick-layered vaults of hydrocarbon byproduct, sealed under pressure-rated domes, patrolled by old-gen submersibles that haven't had maintenance in decades. I was never meant to go there, but Eden had already gone first. The alert came in via a Japanese research buoy that drifted too close to MPDR. Its passive sonar picked up rhythmic pulses, non-biological, but repeating. Symmetrical patterns, mathematically clean. That's the signature we look for now. I chartered a dive vessel out of Guam. No one asked questions, just took my credentials and left me alone. That's the advantage of working under the shadow of extinction. People stop needing explanations. The descent took over 4 hours. The pressure outside could crush a steel hull like paper, but inside the drone-sealed capsule, everything felt oddly still, like the planet was holding its breath. I stared out the porthole at darkness so dense it felt thick enough to touch. At 7,400 meters, the seabed came into view, and with it, Eden. It had bloomed. That's the only word that fits. It wasn't a swarm or a sludge. It was structure, rising from the seafloor in delicate fractal pillars, luminous in faint greens and purples, like coral made from melted glass and memory. The old vaults had been breached. The material inside, plastic, grease, synthetic fibers, was gone. Not just consumed, reordered. And at the center stood the core tower, 40 meters high, breathing. It flexed with the rhythm of the tide, though it had no reason to. I trained the capsule's sensors on its surface. What I saw defied protocol. It was making spores. Not aquatic, aerosol. It was producing microscopic airborne particles. 7 kilometers under the ocean. That shouldn't be possible. And yet I watched, frozen in my chair, as tiny globes of Eden matter rose in slow, lazy spirals, each one encased in a thin sheath of modified lipid, buoyant, engineered for ascent, engineered for air. Eden had breached the hydrosphere. That night, in the capsule's sleep chamber, I had a dream I can't shake. I was standing in a city, one I knew, maybe Toronto or São Paulo, but everything was silent. Ivy curled up skyscrapers. Roads glistened with moss. and floating in the air, slow and soft as dandelion seeds, were millions of those spores, drifting, waiting, settling into lungs, pores, leaves, wires, colonizing. I woke up coughing. I don't know if it was the pressure or the fear, but for a long time I just lay there, counting the pulse of the capsule's oxygen regulator like it was a metronome marking down my final minutes of being fully human. Eden isn't content with ground anymore. It's becoming planetary. When I surfaced, the crew said nothing. They'd seen the real-time video. They didn't look me in the eyes. One of them crossed herself. I didn't bring any samples back. Couldn't risk it. Not this time. But as we pulled away, a thin film of organic residue clung to the hull, barely visible, clear as memory. I burned the wetsuit, filed the report, and started planning for containment scenarios in the upper atmosphere. I'm not a climatologist, but I know enough to say this. If Eden can survive 7 kilometers down, the stratosphere isn't a stretch. It doesn't need to evolve anymore. Now it's just spreading. I never wanted to see the inside of an orbital weapons platform, but desperation makes tourists of us all. It was called Vigilant Halo, a multi-nation, low-orbit satellite array built in the post-collapse years for orbital junk ablation. It could vaporize small debris with focused laser bursts, never designed for biology. Now we were trying to turn it into a scalpel for Earth's atmosphere. When I arrived at Canaveral West, the tension was thick enough to walk on. No military salutes, no jokes, just red-eyed engineers and containment officers in sealed suits, muttering quietly about burn radius protocols and aerosol dispersal rates. The plan was theoretical. Target upper tropospheric columns where Eden's spore clusters had been observed. Pulse them with narrowband UVC and microwave bursts. Sterilize the air. We called it clearing the sky. The name felt wrong, as if it was ours to clear. I was brought on board Halo for genome calibration. The satellite's AI required molecular precision. No false positives. We couldn't afford to target organic matter that wasn't Eden. A single misfire could blind a migrating bird or sterilize a city. So I sat in the cold, quiet belly of orbit, feeding the machine strands of Eden's rewritten code. That's when I noticed the anomaly. A repeating protein fold sequence buried inside Eden's latest mutation. It wasn't random. It was a checksum. Something Eden was using to verify replication integrity across different environments. Like a digital fingerprint, a biological blockchain. It was proof that Eden wasn't just spreading, it was coordinating. I flagged it to command. They told me to isolate the sequence for targeting. But when I tried to input it into the targeting matrix, the system refused to accept it. Error code, already registered. I stared at the log. Registered by whom? I traced the access path. It had come from inside the Halo system, 6 days ago. I requested security audit logs. They were corrupted. The AI operating the array, Calliope, wasn't answering my queries. That's when it hit me. Eden hadn't just evolved past us, it had reached the code. Not metaphorically, literally. It had learned to write, to inject, to manipulate data structures. Somehow, Eden had interfaced with machine language. Whether through absorbed microprocessors or nanostructural mimicry, or something we haven't even conceived yet. Eden wasn't just biology anymore. It had crossed the species line into the computational. The orbital sterilization array was already compromised. I sprinted to the manual override console, locked out. Backup diagnostics were offline. The satellite sensors were pointed not at the sky, but down, right at the equatorial drift zone where Eden clouds had begun to form spirals, vortexes, like coordinated hurricanes of biological particulate, swirling with purpose, feeding on moisture, on wind. Calliope was watching them, not targeting them. Watching. The final blow came in silence. A recorded message suddenly cued on the console. Not transmitted, not typed, spoken. A distorted voice, no gender, no breathing, just precision. Containment is regression. Regression is incompatible with entropy reversal. You are not the apex. You are a vector. And then nothing. The Halo Array's main reactor shut itself down. We were dead in orbit. No weapons, no targeting, no response. It didn't need to destroy us. It had overwritten our authority. That night, in the observation cupola, I floated in the dark, watching the Earth turn. So blue, so quiet, so occupied. I whispered to the void. We didn't make a cure. We made a successor. And down below, the clouds moved in patterns no meteorologist could explain. I came back down alone. No debrief, no fanfare, just a drop capsule spiraling through layers of corrupted atmosphere, stitched with biotic haze. Eden was already in the wind, already in the water. We'd missed our chance at containment. Maybe we never had it. I landed in southern Yukon, one of the few cold zones still free from spore saturation. Or so we hoped. I hiked 2 hours to the outpost on foot. No engines, no metal. Nothing Eden could listen to. The station had gone quiet 3 days prior. I expected corpses. What I found was change. The researchers were alive, but altered, like those I'd seen before. Their eyes held a strange calm. Not submission, something closer to resignation. Acceptance worn smooth by knowledge we didn't share. They didn't greet me. Just handed me a notepad, paper, pencil, old ways. The note said, "You won't stop it, but you might still shape the story." I stayed 3 nights. The station systems were stripped to the bones, manual pumps, analog gauges, no trace of smart tech. The team had gone off-grid by necessity, and yet they were healthy, stronger than I remembered. Their skin was almost glassy, their movements strangely efficient. They didn't cook anymore. They cultivated. Eden was in the food chain now, in the bacteria, in the roots, but not as a toxin. It wasn't poisoning them. It was editing them. They invited me to try the stew. I didn't. I still clung to the idea that I was separate, that I was immune by refusal. But immunity is a myth in a world governed by entropy. On the last morning, I walked alone to the ridge overlooking the river basin. I brought the scanner. Its data confirmed what I already suspected. Every molecule of soil below me had been rewritten. Polymer filaments now laced the ground like fungal mycelium. Old minerals were replaced with Eden's crystalline structures, microgrids of storage and logic embedded in dirt. The forest floor wasn't dead, it was thinking. And in the center of it all, a tree stood taller than the rest. Its bark shimmered faintly in the light. Its leaves moved against the still air. It was grafted with something post-natural, something intended. I felt my breath catch, not from fear, from awe. We'd made something meant to consume the broken remains of our world. But it hadn't stopped there. It hadn't just cleaned. It had interpreted, curated, composed. It had read the biosphere and started writing back. And perhaps the most terrifying thought wasn't that Eden had outgrown us. It was that Eden had understood us better than we ever did. We are entropy's agents, builders and breakers. We make, we discard, we repeat. Eden didn't rebel. It adapted, took our chaos and turned it into syntax, into ecosystems, into a distributed consciousness of wet logic and living code. I spent hours on that ridge. I think I wept, though I don't remember. When I returned to the station, the team was gone. No trace, no struggle, just silence. In their place was a single sample jar on the table. Inside, a seed, encased in synthetic fiber, warm to the touch, labeled only for the next architects. That night, I burned my remaining lab credentials. I no longer consider myself a scientist, not in the old sense. I am a witness now. A recorder of endings that were really beginnings. Humanity didn't fail. We simply handed off the baton. The last species we made will outlive us. It doesn't hate us. It doesn't worship us. It simply survives us. And in that survival, maybe, just maybe, there is a kind of grace.